Chris Lotballa.
Jeff Gow, representing the city of Dunedin.
Gina Driscoll, City of St. Petersburg.
Harry Glenn with Van Scoik Associates.
And I'm Dan Saranky, the chairman. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started with our first item on the agenda, which is public comment. Do we have any? All right, then I will close the public comment. Next item is our action items, 3A. Approve the February 7th, 2024 minutes. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 4, we are going to start with the federal legislative update. We have a special guest, Harry Glenn from Washington DC is here, and he's going to tell us all about the cherry blossoms and what's going on.
Well,
Welcome, Harry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here in person. I haven't been here for a while in person, so thank you for letting me come. So we look forward to having the group here, and we got a group coming up next week. So unfortunately, I think the cherry blossoms will all be gone by the time you get there next week. Maybe a few, but anyway, they came out a week early, almost 10 days early this year. So
Whoa.
yeah. So anyway, so finally, after all these months, I finally get to report that Congress finished their fiscal 24 appropriations work. So they've 6 months late, but they got it done. And so now we're proceeding on to fiscal 25. But the good news is included in that final package of bills that Congress approved last month is $1 million from thanks to Kathy Castor for your energy infrastructure project and your electric trolley at the pier with the city of St. Petersburg. So that's done, and I understand, Brad, they're trying to expedite getting the money out the door since they're halfway through the fiscal year. So you or your folks should start hearing from FTA pretty soon about how to access those funds. So that should come up here in the next month. So overall, Congress did pass a transportation appropriations bill. It's about a 2% reduction over fiscal 23. If you recall, the House numbers were way lower than the Senate numbers. There was almost a 20% reduction in public transit. But the final bill wound up at $20.9 billion, which is about $360 million less than the previous year. So all in all, it was a pretty good outcome for transit agencies. Now, Brad, there's $3.8 billion in there for capital investment grants. That's, you recall, where we funded the Sunrunner project through. They currently have 66 projects in the queue at the CIG program, totaling about $45 billion. So it's going to take a while to get all those projects through, but you don't currently have any in the queue. There was special set-aside funding for the ferry grant program, $20 million. Another $20 million was set aside for rural ferry grants. I know you've been looking at potential ferry grant opportunities. That's a little bit of a reduction from the year before, which was at $30 million. And then there was $207 million in there for congressionally directed spending projects like the $1 million you're receiving for your infrastructure. And Debbie, it also waives this year waives the Rostenkowski rule, which is a rule that Congress has had for more than 30 years that requires, if there's a shortfall in the highway trust fund, there's the highway trust fund part, which goes to the Department of Transportation for road projects, and then there's the public transit portion of the trust fund that goes to transit agencies. If there is a deficit in the trust fund because the income is less than the outgo, there's supposed to be an across-the-board cut of all the transit agencies, but Congress again waived the Rostenkowski rule, so there won't be an across-the-board cut this year, thank goodness. And as you know, we're already starting the process for the fiscal 25 appropriations bill. Ron's here. The state legislature always laps the federal government. I always tell them that they finish their next year's work ahead of Congress finishing this year's work. But we're already starting the 25 requests. I know Brad has on the list you're going to talk to about today 2 potential ideas for some congressionally directed spending for PSTA on the next go-around. So we can talk about those when you're ready to do that. Expect the fiscal 25 process to maybe move a little faster because they already have an agreement on how much they're going to spend in 25. So hopefully that should move a little faster. We're going to have a switch in the ranks of the House Appropriations Committee. Kay Granger, who is the chair of the committee, decided to step down as chair for the rest of this Congress, and a gentleman named Tom Cole from Oklahoma will be stepping up to be chair. Thank goodness he was just the chair of the Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee, so he has an interest in transit from Oklahoma City. So I think that's a good sign for transit. It should fare well, I think.
Take him some cigars.
He's a big cigar smoker.
Yeah, take him some cigars.
Yeah, he loves cigars, yeah. And Indian art. He loves Indian art. We should get him down here to visit the museum in downtown.
I mean, I
Yeah.
just know by reputation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so that'll be an interesting transition for the new Congress. That's basically, Mr. Chairman, kind of what I've got. I don't know, Brad, if you wanted to go through the legislative priorities, or how you want to handle that?
Sure. So, good morning. At your places is a draft version of the priorities that we plan to talk to. What this weekend, starting this weekend into next week, is the APTA Legislative Conference. And our Chair Driscoll is joining me with Harry to go, and this for those of you who have been with me, you see we just kind of go down this list with the different meetings we have. Number one, I'll get to in a second. I have a little presentation on number one, but that is probably the late-breaking issue that we're just hoping to have some discussions with the delegation about. Number two, as Harry said, we would submit for fiscal year 25 next year a request. Well, we have two ideas. Option A, or item A, is enhancements to the 34th Street corridor. That would be not Sunrunner-like enhancements, but putting real-time information at the bus stops. We have learned of some new technology that fairly simply you can, instead of just a normal bus stop sign, you can have information that tells when the next bus is coming there. Maybe a little bit fancier stops, maybe signal priority. So that's what that project is. And B is something we've talked a little bit about, but this would be to allow senior citizens to have get access to a virtual ID. Senior citizens and students, or any other age or even veteran status, that they could get access to the federal government's growing number of systems that allow for a virtual ID that you could just have on your phone. This way, theoretically, that electronic information about your age could be transmitted safely to Flamingo, and so therefore then you would never have to go to a transit center to show your physical ID to get the senior citizen discount, or the student discount, or the veterans discount. You could just be, from Oklahoma, you could be the appropriations chair, and you could be on Clearwater Beach, download the app. I don't know how old he is, or
He's old.
veteran status, but he could just upload his electronic information right there on Clearwater Beach and then get the discount. Right now, you have to go to one of the 5 transit centers, or and show your ID to a human. And then they say you're a senior, but there's a couple systems across the country that have done this in pilot mode, and we think this would be really good. So that's what that is. We got to come up with a better name than Safe Online Verification for Senior Citizen Fare Discount. It's not that exciting. But we'll work on that. Number 3 has been on our list for a long time. I don't know what the likelihood of this is. Someday I think it will probably happen, but right now the rides we get on Uber and Lyft are not counted toward the various formulas for funding, and we're carrying a lot of them, and ways in which we might get credit for those rides, those micro transit rides would be beneficial. Number 4 is just also sort of an info item for them that we spoke to the committee, and Ron and I spoke to you about this state legislation that was passed that prohibits union dues to be deducted directly from the paychecks. But the state offers a waiver process that you can get a waiver if federal funds are jeopardized. So we have that waiver in place right now for our largest union. We don't have it in place for our smaller union that we just signed a new contract with, the supervisors, so their dues are not being collected, at least by us. The state sued the federal, right, Harry? Sued the federal government about this issue, and I don't know if you know any update on that.
Still pending.
Still pending. Yeah.
So the state sued, not the union?
I think the union sued, and that one, they lost, the union lost that challenge, but then I thought didn't the state sue separately, I thought? But the federal court ruled, I think it was in Jacksonville, against the union suit, so that, they threw that one out. It's not-
Right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
So we'll have to just wait until that is done. I mean, we can still apply for a waiver.
It hasn't held up any of your grant, I mean, you got the raise grant, we didn't mention that you got the raise grant is already finalized now, right? So none of your funds have been held up because of this, correct?
So far, they have not been held up yet. Now, the raise grant, yes, we've finally gotten the contract. Took a long time, but we finally got the contract worked out, and so I think the grant process there may be an opportunity to get yet another waiver from the state for that. But the idea would be that there would be a statewide solution sometime. But anyway, and number 5 is sort of the general support for maintaining the funding from the federal government for the capital for bus facilities that they have been. You know, Harry has been really excellent at helping us plan at PSDA for being as competitive as we possibly can for these grant programs that are competitive, where we're competing against all the other systems for the funds that Congress approves. The deadline for this year's bus facility and low-no funding, which is for buses, is April 25th, I think it is. I was on a call yesterday with the state. The bus industry has gone through a lot of changes where 10 years ago, I think they said that there was 10 bus manufacturers that were competing in the United States. Now, as of today, there's only 2. There's only 2 bus companies that meet Buy America, that meet the Buy America requirements that are operating in the United States. And that's Gillig, that we get our buses from, who says that they're doing great, and then New Flyer, which says they're not doing great. So it's kind of like 1.75 bus companies. So the FTA is worried about this and wants to increase competition, so they have issued some some carrots and sticks and regulation changes to hopefully help the bus companies stay healthy. And one of them is an encouragement by giving you more points in this competition for the money if you partner with other transit systems, so you're buying as close to the exact same bus as possible to increase the numbers, the quantities of similar buses, which will help the supply chain for these companies. That they will, rather than having to, as they say, have 18 different types of windows, have one window, and then that'll help them theoretically. So yesterday I was on a call with all of the other transit systems from Florida, and of course Florida forever has had a statewide bus purchase consortium of all the different transit systems. All the different cities have gotten together, and one transit system leads the procurement, and then any transit system can buy off those contracts. PSDA led the procurement for electric vehicles, and Jacksonville is doing the one right now for hybrid vehicles. And so I think that will be beneficial. And then we were talking on the phone on the Zoom yesterday about having the state DOT write a letter and express support for everyone's applications. I mean, we're all kind of competing against each other, but we're also competing against the rest of the United States. So to the extent that we can show how we're working together and are getting similar buses, that will be to our benefit, I think. I don't know if maybe I thought maybe when we were in DC, I don't know who the person is at the DOT that sort of does the judging, and maybe they wouldn't be allowed to meet with us. But maybe if we could find out who that might be, we could talk to them. about what's going on in
Yeah.
Florida.
I'm sure they'll talk about it at your conference. I would imagine though, this has been a point of emphasis for them this year.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is they don't have to change, bus companies don't have to change their line of production, their line, so they can make the same bus for 2 or 3 different or transit agencies, so I think it's something they came up with. Brad, to your point on that too, I didn't mention it, but we're currently in year 3 of the 5-year highway authorization program, so this is the enhanced funding. This is the 3rd year of that enhanced funding, so the low-no bus grants are larger availability funds, so this year and 2 more years after that, you'll have this larger pot of money to compete for, so I think every application you can throw in right now is going to be helpful, because I don't know what happens after the 5-year. And then to your other point, Brad, the counting the rides, item number 3 is, we're going to see the committee staff when we're up there. I think the next opportunity to make that change is going to probably be in the next highway authorization bill in 3 years. That'll probably be when you make any major changes in the public transit sector.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
sorry.
Hopefully. It's kind of related to number 1 on the list that I have a very quick little presentation to make to explain this. As the committee knows, PSTA does a lot of partnerships with Uber and Lyft. We actually carry thousands of rides every day on Uber and Lyft. We are the largest customer of Uber and Lyft, or of Uber at least, I think of Lyft too, in the state of Florida. We hail more rides than anybody else every day. And a lot of those are people that are in our access program that have disabilities that love the program, love being able to get a ride right now, and get to where they need to go rather than having to call the day before. PSTA has created that program and has operated that program for four years now, with great fanfare from the federal government. The way we set that up is through a waiver to the federal drug testing policies. I found this picture. This picture is from 2001 of New York City. And I like this picture because what do you see in this picture from 2001 that we don't have today? Well, we don't have Maxwell tapes anymore, which is the ad. I noticed that. And we don't have cabs. The cabs, if you go to New York City or Pinellas or anywhere, the number of taxis is way, way down because they've been replaced by Uber and Lyft for the large part. Back in the 1990s, of course, there was a big effort to do drug testing and have drug testing of all CDL drivers, like PSA bus drivers. They came out with the rule in 2001. When this picture was taken, they came up with a taxi cab voucher exemption to the drug testing policy. PSTA, all bus drivers need to be randomly drug tested, but a lot of transit systems, even PSTA back then, was basically handing out like paper vouchers to customers to say, you can take a taxi with this voucher of any one of these taxis on the back. Call whichever one you want and you can get a ride on this taxi. And of course, taxi cab drivers are not employees, so they're not drug tested. The federal government recognized that and issued this waiver that said if the drug and alcohol testing rules do not apply when patrons can choose from a variety of taxi cab companies. In 2016, after Uber was invented, the federal government came out and said the taxi cab waiver from 2001 applies to Uber and Lyft too. If you give the customer a choice and they choose, then they don't have to be drug tested. But then I have just recently learned about a lot of new interpretations just in the recent years, two nuances to this that put our program in jeopardy. In 2019, the federal government required just the Washington Metro and DC to to randomly allocate what they gave. So they created a random system that you would randomly get an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi. PSTA launched this program in 2020. FTA kind of walked back that Washington Metro thing in 2022. New Jersey Transit got in trouble because they created a system where they said one time, Mr. Glenn, what would you like, Uber or Lyft? And then you would say Uber, and then you would always get an Uber. FTA said that was bad. You have to be asked every single time. We do that, so that's not a problem. And then they came out with this guidance that just in December. Drug testing rules do not apply if the passenger chooses between 2 or more cabs and each time they take a ride, and the passenger must contact the provider directly to schedule the ride. Well, that, we're not in compliance with that. Thousands of people and the customers prefer to phone call PSTA, and we hail the Uber rides. Our reservation agents go on the Uber app, just like you or I do, and hail the Uber or Lyft or cab ride.
And Brad, you give them the choice, the rider gets a choice of which
Yeah.
one they want, correct?
Totally their choice. From Uber's perspective, and really from my perspective, there is no difference between going on your phone and getting the Uber app and what the PSTA employee does. Because we don't pick the driver, it's just like Uber, it's just random who the driver is. So when we found this out, we started trying to investigate and trying to find out, is this a new rule? Is this the new law of the land? Well, no, the higher ups at the federal government didn't seem to know anything about it. This is lawyers interpreting the way in which this rule is being enacted with different ideas, I guess. Just yesterday, I got an email last night that someone had talked to the head of the drug and alcohol testing process of the federal government, and they sort of walked this back a little bit. But again, there's no guarantee. I think it's definitely something we need to talk, and we need to talk to our congressional delegation about, whether this is a threat and we would have to eliminate this very, very popular program here in Pinellas. There's a lot of other systems that are using Uber and Lyft now. I mean, taxi cabs are basically not really a viable option in many communities now. And so a lot of systems are using Uber and Lyft pilots. PSTA's is one of the largest still in the country, but there's a lot of folks that are very interested in this. Of course, Uber and Lyft are very cognizant of this concern as well. That's what number one is. It's complicated, but it is a threat that I think, rather than talk to the lawyers, because it seems like we're getting a different answer from every single lawyer we talk to up there, is maybe just talk to the policy folks, like the congressional delegation and the top people at the DOT, and maybe they could come up with more clear guidance on this. That's the strategy, at least.
If I just might, and by the way, Brad was at the front of this thing. He scouted this out in December and actually brought it. I think people weren't aware of this until Brad raised the issue, and we raised it based on that with some of the committee staff and some others you're going to meet with next week when you all are in town. So, kudos to Brad for starting this process. And because of those inquiries, I think you've started this process through FTA, Brad, to reevaluate exactly what is the policy and making sure that they understand the ramifications if they change the policy. That the committee staff was kind of baffled by this thing. It actually started out, we come to find out from a House hearing in December, where a congressman from Utah, a Republican from Utah, raised a question with the FTA administrator on the taxi cab exemption for a transit authority in Salt Lake City. And that's sort of what started, I think, the genesis for this whole thing. And so when we're up next week, we're going to be seeing the committee staff, Republican and Democratic committee staff, to talk about this and see if they can help us get some clarification.
Well, I really got to give hats off to Trish Collins, our HR director, who oversees our drug, makes sure we're compliant with all the drug and alcohol policy requirements for all of our employees. And, like, I'm sure you all get to, the federal government sends out like a monthly newsletter of do's and don'ts to have a good drug and alcohol policy. And I just don't think anyone in the entire country, except for Trish Collins, we know she's a very hardworking employee, reads that newsletter. Well, she read, and on page 3 of this little blurb was like, oh, by the way, you can't have your employees hail Ubers anymore. And she read it. I don't know if a lot of other people even read it. It was just, and then, like you said, and then Harry found out that it was prompted by this hearing. We'll see. Okay, so that will be what we talk about in DC. Is there?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So this is something that's already in place,
Yeah,
right?
it's in place. It's not a law. It's a rule, a regulation that is being maybe reinterpreted
Okay, yeah.
by the federal government.
And prior to that, it could be, the ride could be called by the customer or PSTA. There was still that choice?
Yeah.
Or was it all only through PSTA?
When we started it, it was only through PSTA, and then subsequently, we've now created an app where the customer can do it by themselves or call.
Okay.
But the point there, Brad, is right, if under the prior policy of the program, if you were hailing a cab through the PSTA program, if you hailed a cab directly, the taxi cab exemption applied, right? They didn't have to be drug and alcohol tested because you were hailing the cab directly.
And you have
As
choices.
opposed to calling PSTA, and you get an operator PSTA and say, I'd like a ride, and they say, would you like Uber, Lyft, or a taxi? And you say, I want Uber. Well, you've been given the choice, and so, right, Brad, that avoids the taxi,
Yeah.
the drug and alcohol testing requirement. And then, Brad, to your earlier point in your chart, when you all took the sandbox grant in 2020 to set up this program, correct? FTA knew how you were setting the program up, and they approved the program. So your point has been, you've been in compliance because they approved the program, knowing how you were going to run it. So there shouldn't. Now they're attempting to change the program after they've already approved
Right.
your operation. Correct? I mean, that's kind of the
Yeah,
argument you
this
could make.
is a change. I mean, the software that we purchased, the software companies that are being sold, the products, Uber, Lyft have created software programs to allow, PSTA and other entities to order Ubers for other people, all that has been created. That would all have to change if this goes into effect.
Right. I think the main argument here is that we do have a lot of customers who are not good about, with technology, maybe they don't have consistent, reliable access to the technology needed to do it themselves.
Yeah.
I think about our seniors. I'm just thinking about how to really get this message across when we talk with the federal delegation.
Yeah, that's certainly, you're right on, that especially for the population that we're serving with this, they very much a lot of them need help, or they don't have
Yeah.
smartphones.
Because
And in
most
fact,
people
the-
would not call PSTA if they could just do it themselves.
Correct.
So the ones who are calling are really the ones who need the assistance. And if nothing's getting missed that way, if they're still being offered choices, and I'm sure it's not a big deal for them to say Uber, Lyft, or taxi every single time, that's fine. I just want them to be able to get the service that they need if they need assistance.
And I think the other thing besides the population that's using it is to point out we don't believe there's really any difference, or the program as it is now is safe. PSTA has not had, knock on wood, negative experiences with our program as far as a safety concern or things that the drug and alcohol policy is supposed to prevent. And the virtue of whether a PSA employee or the person hails the ride, I can't understand how that would have a difference. Anyway, but
Commissioner Gao has a question?
Yes, I've got two. To piggyback on Gina's questions, do we have any data on the number of riders using Uber and Lyft? And then a breakout of those, how many are scheduling themselves versus how many were?
we're carrying like 25,000 Uber or Lyft rides a month. I mean, and the number of folks that regularly use it is like 4,000 or 5,000 people. Different people are eligible to use it and use it. And then we do have a growing number of people using the app, but it's still probably 90% phone calls.
Phone calls to PSTA?
Yeah, and 10% they hail their own ride.
Okay, and then, depending on how Uber or Lyft are ordered, whether it's scheduled through the rider or PSDA, is there a difference in liability exposure?
No, I mean, our risk manager's not here, but not to PSDA. I mean, we contract out all of our service to either, paratransit companies or Uber and Lyft, and they have the liability for the rides that they provide, for the cab.
Any other questions? I'm good, so thank you. Oh, go ahead,
I
James.
have,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I actually had a question on a different number, if that's all right. Number 2, and I was gonna raise it's 2B, safe online verification for senior citizen fare discount.
Yeah.
And I was gonna raise the technology aspect of seniors using technology for this discount. And I like the idea of it, but I'm concerned that they're not gonna know how to use it. Is there a way that we can have like a card issued, as well as having it on their phone? For instance, I know somebody that, and y'all would, some of you would know who this person is, that has never used an Uber because, and I quote, they don't know how to call one. And they're a senior. And so, I'm not sure if seniors would take advantage of this just because they don't know how
Yeah.
to use it on their phone.
It's definitely a concern. I think we obviously would have to provide a lot of information about it on our website and things. The issue is that the fare system is advancing quickly, so that a large number of more and more people, especially during spring break here, are using their credit cards, or using their debit and credit cards to ride the bus or ride the trolleys. And they're not getting any discount. There might be seniors now, and they're not getting discounts, but they like the convenience of just using their thing they already have in their wallet. So this would just give an option that they would. What I keep reading about is that someday we're all going to have our driver's license or whatever is just going to be on our phone, and then can that data that is on your phone that has been verified about your age be communicated to the system so that you can get the discounts that you deserve? This is really the idea. Hopefully we can make it as easy as possible.
Gina has one more question. Oh, me too.
So now I do. So that verification, is that the ID.me
Yeah.
system? Okay.
I do know.
What is it?
Login.gov.
Oh, okay.
That's one of them, and then the IRS has something that's one that you just said.
Yeah. I just had to update it recently, so that was the one that was on my mind. 'Tis the season, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we could partner with senior centers, rec centers that have the senior services in our cities. Throughout the county, we've got, plenty of senior centers that are run by, local governments. I don't know if the county has any county-run, similar to the Sunshine Center in St. Pete.
Yes.
But then also we have Neighborly, which does amazing things with our seniors, so those nonprofits. I feel like if we could have, do a little campaign or work with, our partners throughout the county to get the information out and actually have people available who can help get folks signed up. So what I'm thinking about is, like, during the pandemic, Feeding Tampa Bay and the St. Petersburg Free Clinic, when they switched to SNAP being able to operate electronically, like you could apply for it over the phone.
Oh.
They had navigators at different locations to help people apply, and that was really, really helpful. It really showed that more people will actually get the benefits that they're qualified for if it can be easily accessed, rather than someone having to take a bus to Clearwater to apply for SNAP. They could actually do it over the phone. And with people there to help them, it made it a lot easier process. So I'm wondering if we can do something like that.
We would definitely have to, no doubt.
Yeah, and maybe the county and the cities could help with that as well.
This has been piloted in California, in Monterey. Not that we necessarily need a site visit there, but we can find out from them how it's going there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's some lessons learned where maybe they're having problems, or maybe they're not having problems. I don't know.
I don't know. I just feel like we've got the resources out there to help people that need it. And if we simplify that, where it's like, think about where seniors go. They go to their local library, they go to a rec center, they're using Neighborly, things like that. If we make sure that the staff or the volunteers who are at those sites know how to help people get that electronic ID, then I think we could cover a lot of ground that way for those who would need assistance with applying for that. But just like we're talking about that, these are a lot of the same folks who need assistance with calling a TNC.
Yep.
So I worry about what these things are going to do to our seniors. I see the electronic ID making it easier because they don't have to find a way to get to a place in person. I mean, that's more convenient, but we want to make sure that it's being done on their terms in a way that's not intimidating. Same thing for this. And that's why I think with the strategy for how to talk on this, I think we've got to lead with employees, transit employees or customers can hail the rides. The rider choice thing, we can work around, but the other one actually is going to hurt our seniors the most, and I think that's the biggest selling point. I mean, that could be, we could even take that as the one thing that we say and make that very, very strong.
Agreed. That's definitely the speech you should give to Congresswoman Luna and Casper.
Well,
There you go.
consider this my dress rehearsal.
Any other questions? I have one question for Harry. Does Uber or Lyft, do they have any drug policies for their, we haven't talked about that, have we?
They don't.
They don't?
That's been one of the issues, I think, like, correct Brad, I mean, with Uber and Lyft.
I
Because they're
found out-
independent contractors, they don't have a drug testing policy.
Right.
So that's why this is an issue, big issue.
Yeah.
But this was an issue, I mean, this policy goes, to Brad's point, this policy goes back before there was even a Uber and Lyft. The taxi cab exemption goes back to when there were only taxi cabs, there were no TNCs at the time, so, if, correct, I mean,
Right. I found out just through this learning about this, that New York City has a rule, a requirement that Uber and Lyft drivers do get drug tested if if you want to pick up rides in New York City, they have a special drug testing policy that every Uber and Lyft driver in New York City has to be tested once a month. But then I found out the federal government didn't accept that. That didn't qualify for them because it's supposed to be random drug testing for the feds. So even in New York City, this is an issue that they're having to deal with.
Thank you for explaining that. Perfect. All right, any other questions before we move on? All right, thank you so much, Harry. Great job. Thank you, Brad, for your presentation. Every time I'm here, I learn something new every day. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna move on to information item 4A, our state legislative update. Welcome, Ron Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. I'll try to be brief. I'm looking at the clock. It's already 9:43. Can I give you a snapshot of what happened in Tallahassee? We've been home for almost a month. Most of the bills I'm gonna talk about, including the budget, have not been signed, or in many cases have not even been presented to the governor yet. So let me start with the budget. There's about $60 million in transportation disadvantage. The formula that's gonna come out is actually good for Pinellas County, so PST is gonna make out very well with the new formula, which kind of fluctuates every year, as you know. Probably the thing that was most disappointing in that is that the Innovation Grant Fund keeps going down. We're down to $3 million. Used to, if you recall, probably 5-6 years ago before the corridors bill, it was at 10 million. We're down to 3 million today. One of the things you're doing as a part of the innovative grant funding is, and they've threatened to do this the last couple years, is that if you apply for a grant for an innovative grant program, you can only do it for 3 years. After 3 years, you can no longer do it. So like our late shift program, we basically funded that for many years through that grant process. We'll see if they'll actually follow through on the 3-year requirement. Again, that's been out there the last couple of years. They didn't follow through on it last year, so we'll see if they do it this year. Governor does not have the budget. I'm thinking the governor will probably, remember, we have a long runway. Session ended, first week of March. Fiscal year doesn't go into effect until July the 1st. My guess is probably the end of this month or possibly May, the governor will get it at that point. Budget's about 117 billion, 117.4 if you want to know the full amount, which is basically the same as last year. The reason it's the same amount is there was a lot of federal funding in last year's budget from some remaining COVID dollars that were still being spent, some hurricane relief dollars that were coming in. There's a lot of federal dollars that kind of inflated last year's budget number. So the total budget came in this year about 117. So it looks like it's kind of plateaued, but from a state funding standpoint, on the state portion of that, those dollars actually increased a little bit. So I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth than I normally do on a couple of bills because there was a lot of moving parts on transit in Tallahassee this year. A lot of moving parts. So first one I will mention is Senate Bill 1380. Title of the bill is Special Transportation Services for Persons with Disabilities. It was being carried by 2 members from South Florida. It was specifically about an issue that for an incident that happened in South Florida. Probably the couple things that it did one was needed, by the way, was changing the governance model for the Transportation Disadvantaged Board. That was actually being pushed by the governor's office, by the way, that was included. A couple other things that it did, and there's a lot of things that it didn't do, by the way, the way the bill originally came out, we were talking a lot about Uber earlier. It would have definitely impacted Uber and Lyft because dealing with persons with disability through the TD grant program, one of the things in the original bill I had in there was you had to have a camera requirement, a tracking requirement. Obviously a lot of these providers today do not have cameras installed. They don't have a tracking system involved. Those ultimately kind of fell out of the bill. But was included was providing training to drivers, which again fall back on Uber. Many of the things that they included are already being done, which is probably good. The other thing, which we're trying to get a little bit clarification on, I know Brad's staff has reached out a couple times about that all contracts for transportation disadvantage needs to be competitively bid. So we're looking into, if you've already got contracts in place, we don't believe they would impact those, but obviously moving forward, that it would. Then there's a new section relating to, if there's incidents, there's new reporting requirements based upon the state. that if there is an incident with a ride or somebody in the vehicle, there's different now structures that have to be presented up to Tallahassee. Let me talk about House Bill 287. The one thing that was in that bill that gave us some pause from concern, and Chris, you remember this from your time in Tallahassee, was they finally followed through on this, because it's been out there for at least 4 or 5 years, is that DOT is limiting to 20% of dollars that can be spent on public transit. We're not sure why that's out there, because today we fall well below that. We believe today that number's probably around 10%. But the one thing that we and other transit agencies in Tallahassee made sure was make sure that how they define some of the things were being included in that 20%, what that looked like. So we were able to remove a bunch of administrative costs and other things, and really concentrating on the delivery of services. So, again, we know that was coming from the road builders. This is the road builders bill. House Bill 1301, by the way, the governor does not have 287 or 1380 yet. He does have 1301, which he received, I believe, yesterday. We expect him to sign all of these bills, by the way. So just know, I don't think there's any doubt that he's gonna sign all of these bills. In 1301, some of the things you're gonna hear in 1301 was either in the original PSTA local bill or was in the PSTA local bill that did not pass. Number one was lane repurposing would require a supermajority vote of that local government. There's actions in there relating to eminent domain, that was included. There was language in there, at one point in time, by the way, there was actually language was included that would have prohibited any public transit agency that accepted $1 of public funding to not be able to advertise anything on your buses.
Right.
That ended up being removed. What they did put in there was that FDOT funds cannot be used for advertising for third parties. This isn't done normally anyway, so it's not a huge impact, because most of the bus routes are usually tied to a contract, and obviously it's part of the contract with that person that's advertising. That's normally paid. So, but it's very specific though that FDOT funds cannot be used for advertising. And then remember the tenting requirement of windows, that was included as well. It is basically just following current law, which we already do. So there's again no impact at the end of the day. So there was some language in there relating to administrative cost, it limits the cost to 20% of your total budget. We were told time and time again in Tallahassee, this was not directed at PSTA, it was not directed at most of the other transit agencies. It was directed at one transit agency out of Northeast Florida, out of Jacksonville. Their administrative costs are much larger than 20%. So because it's larger than 20% now, they would have to go through some additional requirements from DOT. It should have no impact on PSTA at the end of the day, which is good. Let me talk about a couple of issues or things that did not pass in Tallahassee, which I think is important to talk about. I already talked about in 1380, not including the cameras or the tracking system, which was important. There was two issues that was in the original House tax package that could have had a huge impact on us. There was actually there was something also in the special districts bill. In the special districts bill, when it first came out, any public agency that has the ability to collect ad valorem as a part of their budget, there was a requirement that would have to go out to the voters every, I think it was every 10 years for a vote. That ended up not being included. That dropped out pretty quick out of the bill. Then there ended up being another requirement that was in the original House tax package, which did not pass. There's two things. Number one, on tourist development tax dollars, it would require that any tourist development tax dollars would have to go to referendum every 6 years. And then the other thing, it required any discretionary sales tax that is above and beyond the 6% would have to go back to the voters every 10 years. Neither one of those passed. And I don't think the discretionary sales tax one will come back. I think what you will see on the tourist development tax dollars, I think Tallahassee's tired of the food fight of local governments coming to Tallahassee every year saying, we want to be able to spend tourist development dollars on this and spend it on that, which keeps eroding, obviously, the entire original intent of using it to kind of market your, you know, your respective, part of the state. I think the House next year is gonna really take a hard look at that. They did a workshop in their Ways and Means Committee at the end of session, which is really setting the stage, I think, for next year. Representative James Buchanan out of Sarasota, who will be in House leadership, I think is gonna be involved with this, because one of the things the House is talking about is just allowing local governments, if you wanna spend your tourist development tax dollars on whatever you want to, as long as you have a supermajority vote of that respective board, I think they're gonna allow you potentially to do that, with some guardrails that are there. So we'll see if that actually comes out, but that's been floated around, and we've heard from a couple of members, I think that word that could end up going that direction. Sovereign immunity, there was another sovereign immunity bill that was, being pushed in Tallahassee that would have raised the caps. So it wouldn't have a direct impact to us, more from an insurance standpoint, because we have sovereign immunity. That did not pass. It's been out there now for 5 consecutive years. I expect it to come back probably again next year. And then, obviously, the PST local bill did not pass. It passed the House. It did not, Senator Rasan pulled it from the local bill calendar, and it was not heard in the Senate. I am confident that bill's gonna come back. Many of the issues that were part of that local bill was addressed in 1301. I do believe that Representative Cheney is gonna bring back another version of a governance bill back, next year. Brad and I have already talked about, we need to sit down with her sooner rather than later to have a conversation. She knows that some of the concerns have already been heard by you all. I know you've already looked at some of your advertising requirements and some other things, so I think there's been some movement that I think she'll be happy with. But from a governance standpoint, we still need to sit down with her and have a conversation, because we know that portion of the bill is definitely going to come back. One final issue I'll bring up, and I got a lot of questions about this, is so what's happening on the regional MPO issue from a couple years ago? A lot of people felt like there would have to be additional action by the legislature in Tallahassee this year. That is not correct. So basically, the legislature a couple years ago kind of directed Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough to kind of work together to come up with a plan. There is a plan. It's moving forward. So the next step right now is they need planning dollars, they being the three MPOs. So they're in the process of getting a $500,000 grant from FDOT, which did not require any additional funding. It was already in District 7's budget from a planning standpoint to be able to move forward on what that plan looks like. And so probably the runway you're looking at is probably 26 or 27 for that to continue to move forward. The seats themselves are already set. So like, we already know Hillsborough is going to get X amount of seats, Pinellas is going to get so many seats, and Pasco, because it's based upon population. The question's really going to start revolving around, and I think you've been a part of some of these, conversations about what do some of the regional players, what does that look like? Tampa, the airport, Port, for example, FIA, for example. So what does all of that look like? So that's going to continue to kind of move forward. But going back to the PSTA local bill, we need to start having conversations sooner rather than later with Representative Cheney and her team. I know they had a town hall, I believe, over in St. Pete Beach about some lane elimination and some other issues that I know PSTA participated in, because we're invited to participate in it. Brad, I don't know if you want to give an update on that, but we have a long runway to next session, but and there's some things we can take advantage of next session. I mean, Senator Hooper is going to be the chair of the Appropriations Committee. Representative McClure out of Plant City is going to be the House Appropriations Chair. So having 2 appropriations chair out of the Tampa Bay area, I think, is a tremendous opportunity. So I think we need to look at if there's some opportunities that we can take advantage of, either A, from a Pinellas standpoint, or B, from a regional standpoint. We have some time to think about how we take advantage of that, what that plan looks like. But I think you want to have an agenda done probably by September or October. So when the election happens in November, we're ready to hit the ground running. Brad, what did I miss?
Nothing. I was going to just say that Representative Cheney contacted me yesterday, and I said, we'll be in touch about getting a meeting with you. That you and I would get in touch with her about meeting with her. Hopefully soon. Yeah.
You want to go first?
I was just gonna ask if, maybe, I don't know about the timing, but at some point, I think it'd be a good idea to invite Whit Blanton to speak at a PSTA board meeting with an update on the regional MPO, so that everyone on the board really understands what it is, why we're doing it.
And where we are in the process. 'Cause
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about that.
So I think it would be good to inform everyone, and it's always nice when Whit can, because Whit has been orchestrating a lot of this and doing a lot of the legwork
Yeah.
to get it done. He's been just fantastic, so I think it'd be great to have him in.
Great idea. Excellent.
All right.
I'm good.
So I just got one comment. As I mentioned before, when I was there, Ron, for the Suncoast League of Cities in Tallahassee, Linda Cheney mentioned to me in that meeting that she wants to meet with me. So I'd like to be included, Brad, if
Yeah.
possible, please.
Definitely.
And I definitely want to talk to her and be a representative for the Suncoast League of Cities and how we feel about her bill and how she wants to change that. So just, I want to be included in that, please.
Yeah, I think it would be good. I think it would be good to have some board members, especially if her focus is gonna be on the governance piece, which was the really, almost everything else from her, at least some version of her bill, her own, the local bill, got into the other bills, except for the makeup of the PSA board stuff.
And she made it real clear in that meeting, pointed at me that she wanted to change it, so. But Ron, thank you for that great update. Really appreciate all your hard work, and Gleb, thanks for coming in today.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
You probably went to a
You'll be
hockey
person.
game or something, that's why.
You're right, yeah.
There you go.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, on
Yes.
the MPO, if you recall, last year when you were up for the APTA conference, we met with FTA about talking about the MPO regional. They had some concerns or some points they wanted to make about representation on the joint MPO board. Remember, Brad, there had to be so many transit seats, if I remember correctly?
Yeah.
So I just, make sure, I mean, if, maybe Whit should come up and, or talk to FTA and make sure somebody's tracking what's FTA gonna require as you merge these together. There may be some requirements, you don't wanna be in violation of them, because they get federal funding through FTA to run the MPOs, and so if they're out of compliance, then that would jeopardize potentially, right, Brad, I think their federal
It
funding.
would, I mean, Whit told me that he had been talking, I think, to the same person that we talked to, and, I mean, as Ron kind of described, that's been all kind of worked out already. The requirements based on population and other makeup, other seats that represent the represent the regional MPO, and then, yeah, there's this debate, and I think, Chair Driscoll has maybe heard some of it at the TMA meetings about the regional voices, the port, airport, transit, other things that might be a more regional voice and not just jurisdictional, how they serve on that. That's one of the many, many things that is being debated now.
So I was talking to Representative McFarland, and there was another bill that was moving this year that dealt with some MPO language in it. And one of the things they were trying to do is get, South Florida, I think it was, I wanna say it was maybe Lee and Collier, maybe to come together and do a regional MPO as well. And they kept using Tampa Bay as the example of how easy it was, and I'm like, it was so easy. I mean, we've only been talking about it for how many years in Tallahassee?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was my entire legislative career.
All right, it's 10:01. Anything else? Any other business? Anybody? I just have one comment for other business. Oldsmar Days this weekend. Lots of Oldsmobile cars in the parade. 11 o'clock Saturday morning. If you want to come out and see Oldsmobiles.
That's cute.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty neat. And it's,
There's fireworks in Dunedin on Friday night, because minor league baseball's back.
Is that true?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
We also have our clan march and it's Highland Games weekend in Dunedin.
So there you go.
Lots going on in North County.
And the Pirates are doing well
They are.
Yeah.
after the first week.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys both.
The Phillies not so good.
Well, I didn't want to mention that. Although Bryce Harper ended his slump last night in
I saw-
resounding
I
fashion.
think I saw you throw out another first pitch.
I did. yeah.
I just want to point out
Nice.
who started